vaginal dryness. Yay, hormones! Because guess what also leads to that? Menopause.
Yes.
Leads to these things too. So it's basically like you give birth and you go through like a fake menopause.
Like a little mini menopause.
It's a I like that. Mini menopause, yeah. So, yay! And now you get to return to work.
You get a little taste test of what you're going to see in the future.
Yeah. So, I returned to work 2 weeks after birth of my first one, 2 months after the birth of my second, and 9 weeks after the birth of my third. Because you can tell I obviously progressed from job to job and started getting jobs at places where I could at least take the time off. The first time I was in college and I was not missing any class. So, by gosh, I popped out that baby just before end of semester and went back and took finals. Because that's who I am. I can't help it. So, but that whole time, your body is processing and dealing with all of those hormones still. The lack thereof and the over-inflection of others, right? And for most people, hormones return back to normal after you have a baby, but that takes 3 to 6 months on average. That's the average. Some people take longer.
Yeah, my hormones are still kinds of haywire. Yeah,
I think I go through phases where my hormones are like not happy, but sometimes they're okay. But I think I don't remember with the first two. That's all foggy and that's a long time ago. But I know like with my last one, I think it was over a year before I was like, okay, I think I'm normal now.
Well, my hormones were so out of whack and I had menorrhagia, which means very heavy bleeding. But I had it 365 days a year, every day. And it was, like, think extraordinary amount of blood loss. Like, I was going in constantly getting checked to make sure I didn't need to go get blood infusions.
I remember.
And I was on constant iron. And it was about 2.5 years.
Yeah, it was
a very long time. And it was horrific. And I was working. By the way, I feel like, because my doctors have told me that this isn't one of the reasons to miss work. And I said, I don't care your thoughts. Because on certain days, I would bleed through everything. Pads, tampons, didn't matter what all I had. I had the heaviest of all the stuff. And I would bleed through all of it and have a large amount of blood on my butt at work. And I just had to go. We fortunately had locker rooms where I worked. And so I would go and change my clothes into as similar of clothes as I had that day. Because I always made sure I had 2 sets that looked really close to the same. So that people wouldn't notice.
Isn't that terrible? And we have to go back to work after this. We still have to go back to work. Because if you have a job and you need that job.
And the doctors couldn't get my stuff regulated.
And apparently that's
2.5 years.
Not enough to miss work over. It's not a medical anything, which is sad. Because I know, obviously, you're not the only woman who's ever had to deal with this. So there's others out there that are dealing with it.
One of the nurses at one of my doctor's offices was talking to me about her situation that was like the exact same.
And there's so much, I don't know, crying and because you miss your baby while you're at work. And if you're like breastfeeding, then I feel like that influences your hormones and stuff at work. And there's just...
Or you start lactating on the job.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
If a small child starts crying somewhere near your office.
And
then your boobs just start leaking.
So I did not have these problems with the last two, but with my first one when I went back...
I didn't have that problem either because mine ended up drying up because I wasn't able to perform either.
But with the first one, I was intentionally not breastfeeding because I had to go get a biopsy done on my breast. And I was pregnant at the time. We determined that I needed the biopsy done, and you can't have a for real biopsy done when you're pregnant. They don't like that because they're trying to be safe. And so I was going to have one done after he was born. And so they were like, you can't breastfeed because we need to get this done as soon as possible just to determine that it's benign. We think it is, but let's go ahead. Breast cancer runs in the family, so It's not even a question, right? I was like, nope, we got to dry these bad boys up. And it took so long. I remember going back to work and back to class, because I worked while I went to school, and my breasts would be so sore and so swollen, and they'd be leaking, and so I was constantly changing out pads, and, you know, you're keeping them wrapped. And so I can't imagine if I was a breastfeeding mom and going back to work, because then every time that happens, you're like, okay, I gotta go pause and go pump or go leave. There are some places that allow you to leave and go breastfeed your baby, so you're not bottle feeding and breastfeeding, right? You're just...
Unfortunately, it's becoming more and more common to have some leniency on that.
Which is nice.
Especially because in America, they make us go back to work so fast that it is nice that they're easing up a little bit on the regulations, and more places are having lactation rooms.
I was gonna say, my new
that
job
aren't the bathroom.
My job has a lactation room.
It's so gross. Like, I am a germaphobe. I freak out.
I am not gonna go sit in the bathroom.
I am not gonna pump in the bathroom.
I would pump it. I would have rather. I think if
I'd rather pump in my car.
I was gonna say, I would have probably been that person that like pumped in the locker room and been like, just check me out. Like, come at me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit in the bathroom. That's not happening. Yucky. I don't know. Anyway,
if you do, I'm sure you do a great job keeping clean.
Those women that do that are like heroes to me, because kudos to you for sticking with it, because it's not easy. So, yep. So, because leaving your baby with somebody to go back to work is obviously an emotional toll as well, there are ways to prepare for your baby to be without you during the day. Or at night. Some moms work at night. I don't want you to feel like I'm coming at you. So thebump.com has the challenge of overcoming feelings of guilt. So they say the best way you can do this is to consider creating a daily ritual where you are totally focused on interacting with your little one. Intentionally avoid looking at your phone during the first morning feeding, soak up sweet snuggles, and enjoy the precious time together, and you can be set up to have a more productive and guilt-free day. And I think that's really good advice, because they're just telling you, well, because you're going to miss your baby, and you're going to feel a little sad because you may have been with them for the past 12 weeks at home, and you carried them for 9 months, and so you're kind of used to hanging out with the little guy, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, take that time to... I know that I personally would do the morning feedings because it meant more to me to do them. I don't know that it didn't mean anything to my husband. I feel like I'm giving the wrong impression, but like I felt like to me they meant a lot, because I'm feeding him his first breakfast, and then I'm the one that's going to take him to school, and so I'm the last person that he's going to see from his family before I hand him over to the daycare workers. Right? And so, to me, that meant a lot. It might not mean as much to some others. I was trying to think, my oldest, he went to school at 6 weeks old, but he stayed with his grandparents when I went back to work the first time. And so, I don't think I felt that loss the same way, because they're staying with people I knew, he knew, and so it wasn't so traumatic for me. But I feel like when I left, my youngest at daycare, because I had had all that extra time with him, and while everybody at our daycare has been exceptionally sweet and kind and all that, you still feel a little guilty dropping him off with a stranger. Because at this point, you don't know them.
But it makes sense making more intentional time in the morning right before you do that you feel a little less guilt, because you're putting in that extra effort. And so you're feeling a little more okay with your decision. I totally see that. Mm-hmm. My kiddo started back at daycare right at 8 weeks, so that I had a couple weeks of him going to daycare before I went to work, and I felt like that really helped me. Mm-hmm. And I picked him up early a lot in the first couple of weeks, because like, what am I doing with my life? Other than bleeding, and
that doesn't count.
So, but it did give me that time frame to kind of just make my brain calm before I actually had to start going to work. But I definitely still showed up at work with random guilt days where they were a little higher than others.
Yeah, the hormones just fluctuate during this time. It's completely normal. You're going to feel a mess, and that's okay. It's really important that you have a support system of some kind in place. Because I don't know how people do this alone. Like, I don't know how you just go, well, I'm doing it and I don't need anybody, because I definitely had a good support system with my husband, at least. And if not my husband, I had family. And if not my family, I did have friends. And if I didn't have friends, at least I had some coworkers I could trust. And so that's how I personally got through it. I mean, you and I were coworkers, so yes. That was nice.
At the time, we both had babies.
Yeah, so that was nice.
Mine was 3 months older, so I got off work a little sooner. Mm-hmm. So I got to hear all the drama coming from work without me.
Right? Because that's what a good friend does, is they have to fill you in on all that drama, because you don't want them to miss out.
But when I did get back, I got the drama when you were gone.
Yeah, it was like perfectly, like, I think you literally came back as I was leaving.
And we each had to do each other's jobs when we were there.
Yes.
And I definitely had a lot of frustrations when I got back, because your job was very different from my job. And so I had to learn a lot.
Sorry.
And on top of that, you know, I was being asked to do a lot of things, and I got overwhelmed every single day. Because I'm constantly, my mind is focused on a baby that I can't see or hear. And I'm constantly being interrupted from my thoughts with all of these questions and people coming up to me and asking me to do this and that and get it done by this day. And I get very frustrated if someone took too long to talk. Now, that sounds really rude, but it's absolutely 100% how I felt in that moment. If someone took 5 minutes to tell me something that they could have told me in 30 seconds, I would get so angry.
I find that very amusing. I'm sorry.
I'm not the most patient person. I know I've said that on this podcast before. But when it was those days, I was absolutely not patient at all for anyone except my baby.
And it's completely normal, right? Like, all of this is normal. And if you are particularly struggling with returning to work after having your baby, then I would recommend making sure that you've reached out to your HR department. Most places have systems in place because they know how difficult this can be. And hopefully you have a really great HR person that's going to help you work through it so that you can either change your schedule up a little bit. You know, there's like little things you can do that can kind of help you.
I did have to change my schedule up a little bit. My husband worked nights, I worked days. And because of that, some of the hours would overlap where we wouldn't see each other. And I needed to be able to pick up and drop off my kid because his shifts wouldn't allow the timing for him to do either. And so I had to make sure that my lunches were short the first couple of months because I needed to be able to get to daycare, get to work, and then get off of work and get to daycare
before
as quick as I could because the hours were just mayhem. And so I did have to change my schedule slightly, not horribly. But a lot of times HR is those people that you can run it by first so that you can have help in how you need to bring it up to your supervisor.
Yeah. That was probably a good call because ours was particularly difficult.
Very much so. I definitely was only going to take a month off of maternity, and I was like stuck to that. I was like, that's what's going to happen. I've got to get these things done. And I'm that type of personality that I always schedule everything. But my kid had a lot of issues.
Just a few.
I was having a lot of issues.
Just a few.
And then my supervisor was running her mouth at work.
She's her own issue.
She's her own issue, and she no longer works there. But
cheers to that. Cheers me. Cheers me. There we go.
And anyway, so I ended up taking 3 months for mine. But again, mine had heart complications and things. And so your situation might be completely different from one baby to the next. And you can hear us that every single one of our children, we were off of work for a different amount of time. So out of 4 kids, it was a different set amount of time for each one.
Every single one of them was different. Isn't that crazy?
And so it depends on your situation at that time and the child's situation at that time as well. And not to feel bad if it needs to be a certain day of the week.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to get it done.